engaging our community has become. And as always, this session is about learning from each other, exchanging perspectives, and taking ideas from one step further together. I'm Birgit Berthold-Kremser, a CISL alumni anchorwoman, and it's a pleasure bringing this community together through our Brainfood series. And I would like to make you aware that this session is recorded and featured in our CISL channel in the course of next weeks. Maybe you could go on the next slide, please. The CISL, a quick, what is Brainfood before we dive in? It's a community-driven lunch and learn format created by alumni for alumni. And the idea is simple. It's to create a space for sharing knowledge, sparking ideas and learning from each other across industry and disciplines, especially in a world increasing complexity. Brainfood is really helpful for all of us, and it's not a one-way presentation. It's a dialogue, a spotlight on our community, and a platform for collective learning. It's the fourth edition. We already had spotlights on the twin transformation with our Jürgen Sommer, on the digital product passport with Wolfgang Steiner, and lab-grown gold with our CISL ambassador, Matthew Kilgrim. On the next slide, you can see, and would like to briefly zoom out and share what's happening across our Munich CISL community right now. Well, it's really beyond networking. Our calendar is filling up, and it's inspiring to see how much energy, initiative, and collaboration is coming from within the community itself. And you can see that reflected in the upcoming weeks. So we have 2 Brainfood sessions. We have our CISL breakfast the first time, and the Footprint Intelligence Conference and summer networking, and the beer garden coming up in July. Now it's time on the next slide. I'd like to introduce a very, very important person to you, and very important brand which is supporting us already. I think the 3rd time. It's Sebastian Gier from the Footprint Intelligence, and you are hosting today's session and providing the technical backbone. And you're also very generous supporting our community with free tickets for the Sustainability Leadership Conference on June 25th. And we are also having a CISL summer gathering in the evening. Sebastian, please welcome and thank you so much. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the upcoming conference.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for that partnership we're having with CISL. And also for putting together this exciting webinar today. We're looking forward to hear what the different perspectives are on the topic we have today. As mentioned, we do host a Sustainability Leadership Conference in partnership with CISL on the 25th of June, bringing together thought leader, industry experts, corporate sustainability managers on various topics that are important. Right now, it's a lot about going beyond reporting. And I will drop a link here in the chat for people to also, so people know where to kind of request the spot. And that's it. Thank you so much for putting this together.
Yes, thank you, Sebastian. And in our WhatsApp chats, you can find the registration link to get free tickets. Thank you again, Sebastian. But I also would like to thank Wolfgang Steiner, our amazing CISL alumni. He, together with Sebastian, has supported our community multiple times over the past year. And I think this kind of commitment is what makes a community thrive, and I'm very grateful for it. Well, let's continue and go to the next slide, please, because we are now on our next spotlight. And I'd like to introduce the speakers. It's Vanya Boneva. She's a sustainability lead Central and Eastern Europe at Essity. I hope I said it the right way. And Vanya is working at the intersection of sustainability strategy and business execution with a strong focus on embedding sustainability in core operations and value creations, together with Jan Parakenings, Senior Manager of ESG at KPMG. And Jan brings deep experience in ESG transformation, reporting, and implementation, supporting organizations in translating sustainability ambitions into measurable business impact. Jan and also Vanya, please, I would like to welcome you here. Maybe you say some words.
Thanks a lot, Birgit. We are indeed very excited today. So first of all, thank you to all alumni members that joined today. I know it's important to invest time in sustainability, so thank you for that. We are totally looking forward to inspire you for a new approach called value creation. So come with us on the journey and yeah, stay curious.
Yeah, nothing more to add, but that maybe brings us to the start of the session today, that I can build the bigger picture. Or you want to say something before, Birgit?
And one other slide, because it's very important, because our community is driven by dialogue. And as always with Brainfood, this is not just about listening. So please feel free, share your questions in the chat throughout the session. We'll pick them up in the Q&A at the end. And I would really like to encourage you to challenge perspectives, bring in your own experience, and actively engage in the discussion, because that's where the real value of this format comes to life. But with this, over to you, Jan and Vanya, and we are really looking forward to your presentations and discussions at the end.
Yeah, very, very well said. So today we want to speak about like how sustainability becomes unstoppable in a time where it feels a little bit time has been stopped on sustainability. And from my point of view, I will show you at the very beginning the broader picture and the observations that I made in the market and with my own experience. And then we actually have a fantastic example brought by Vanya, showing how things can be put to life, and not only talking about ideas and abstracts of models, but as well showing how it can be done and how a successful project is looking like. And yeah, that just maybe as well, before we jump into that, I as well want to give a little bit the the background of it. So Vanya and me as well met in the CISL networks, and as well with our exchange had the possibility to enrich what Vanya was doing, which is as well very nice for me to observe as a third person. So without being directly involved, I think we could see the network being helpful to help our peers. And yeah, just have been like proud watching, seeing the result here. That is maybe setting the scene for today and bringing me directly to the next page, where I want to talk about like what we currently see. And what I want to explain today is basically the observation of what is happening right now in the market. We come from a strong phase in sustainability where we could see ourselves more or less on the highway moving things. Sustainability have been asked and was always part of the agenda. And I call this the pull phase. So sustainability was pulled into the organization since there was a regulatory tailwind, the board attention was high, and the reporting focus was there, more or less coming from the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And therefore, sustainability was not really question about like why it is here. It has the implicit right to be put into the organization. But in that phase, a sustainability manager had more or less the function to start coordinating all the tasks because they needed to be done, and someone need to put some organization into that. Anyhow, times have changed, and we are now a little bit in something like a new reality. And the new reality as well brings a lot of challenges for the sustainability, because it is not pulled anymore into the organization as it was before, and the sustainability manager need to change their point of view how to support sustainability actions still to be put into place. And that is coming mainly from the changes that we have now a regulatory uncertainty. So if you now walk and talk about the EUDR, the EU Deforestation Regulation, which now have been postponed 2 years in a row, you of course have a little bit of a struggle to know how to address it actually in the organization. In addition, we have now geopolitical and economic pressure, which is changing the agenda of a company. What needs to be put first in sustainability, naturally by the impact of what a company needs to focus on is just going a little bit down. And in addition to that, we are now having the challenge that all companies are struggling a little bit due to multiple reasons as well. AI is becoming into use. Business models are asked what to do here. So cost is becoming a very important part in discussion. But that doesn't really naturally mean that sustainability is entirely stopped just because the narrative had changed. But what has changed is how a sustainability manager shall work in its environment. And I like to say that the sustainability manager is now working as an enabler. And an enabler means he is working with the team. He not only coordinates and says who needs to do what, it is actually being on the ground, understanding what needs to be done, and only leaving the team with whom he or she is working until the team knows what to do. Everyone is on the same way, and we are very operational here and bringing sustainability into action. And that is as well, and another important part, I know sustainability or ESG is having such a broad focus of topics, what can be done. But it's important to start prioritizing. And giving the example of the double materiality assessment of the CSRD, it is a great tool to understand what a company may need to do. But I think even that needs to be put into more focus, into knowing what needs to be done, what is really helping the company at the moment. And the leadership function of a sustainability manager, therefore, has now changed from being a coordinator to become an enabler. And therefore, sustainability is still very, very relevant, and we have it still in the discussion, but the narrative completely changed, and I now need to actively demonstrate a value, not only talk about that there is a value. So now, and that is maybe the final, we are coming from a pull organization into a push organization, meaning you need to understand how to push sustainability in the right sense, in the right time, in the right stakeholder map into the organization. That's maybe setting a scene and as well explaining the narrative. And that brings me to the next page, which I very much like. So it feels like we are, from a sustainability team point of view, right now on the substitution bench. So all the big players are on the field having fun and making the company work. But we need to put ourselves now from the substitution bench back on the field and being back in the game. And how to do that and how to be successful here, Vanya brought a very cool example and will tell you now more about that.
Thanks a lot, Jan. So yes, how do we bring sustainability from a substitute bench into the main playing field? I will start with setting the scene from Earth perspective, just to get a reality check. And so what we know about the Earth challenge that we have at the moment is that we are in emergency, indeed. So we have Code Red for Humanity. We have just surpassed the 1.5 degrees Celsius target for last year, 2025. And we have also learned that we have crossed 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries. To sum it up in a very short sentence, it's urgent and we need to act with speed and scale as soon as possible. But what Jan was talking about is it feels more we're sitting on the substitute bench. So the urgency from a planetary health perspective is there. Now, the other challenge that we have and face is very much what I would call the human challenge. While everything is urgent and we need to act, oh, we need time. Exactly the one thing that we don't have is we need time. So what we take time is to align, to decide, and even more time to act. So sum it up, it's complicated. Jan mentioned some of the reasons. Political environment is unstable, regulations are complex. We all operate in market-based economy, and very often sustainability investments are long-term. They have substantial amount, and sustainability often is more expensive than business as usual. Even though we still need to act with speed and scale, and I think this is the most triggering point for us is what is a way forward that we can accelerate that, even though the reality shows a different picture at the moment. And for many of us, now that I talk about with people that sit on the substitute bench and sometimes feel like they have a monster task in front of them to drive sustainability, yes, it feels indeed like a monster, especially when we are asked to drive speed and we face only barriers, and to drive scale when we are confronted with all the cost structures within a company. So the approach that we want to share today with Jan is very much, if you take it as a metaphor, if you cannot fight the monster task, tame it. So and here I come to the value creation approach that builds on this metaphor. So the approach is very much building on the idea how to make it happen from a sustainability idea to bringing it to life in a market-based economy. And then if I stay with the metaphor of the monster task that is in front of us, is first you need to understand what matters the most. So you need to focus and avoid being scattered in your objectives. And the approach builds on two steps that are important to follow is what are the drivers for the behavior. So very often you will have to work with key decision makers, and it's important to understand why key decision makers take decisions, what drives their behavior. And what we'll aim at, and we'll explain that a bit more in detail in the presentation, you will need to search for the KPIs, key performance and indicators that drive and measure success. These very often are the drivers that steer behavior of key decision makers. And the second step is, once you understand what drives behavior, speak the language. And here we will talk about value creation, which is the language of business. Indeed. So I will explain shortly the approach in a systematic way, and then we will go to the example. So what value creation with sustainability aims at is you have a great idea and you have at the end of the day making it happen in reality. In between there is a path that can be sunny and easy, but very often isn't. So the path between having an idea and bringing it to life feels very often like a roller coaster, feels like a battlefield, and feels sometimes like climbing a mountain peak. So what the recommendation for the approach is the following. Once you have a great sustainability idea, first step, get your experts together. So there is a proverb that says, to raise a child, you need a village. In sustainability, that's the case. To bring sustainability idea, you will need a village. And you will need to have experts on the path with you. The first important planning tool that you should use is to build an action plan. So who are the key decision makers? They can turn to showstoppers in bringing to life sustainability ideas. So it's very important to identify who are the decision makers on your path to success. Then what are the drivers? I talk about KPIs. And then what's the language they speak? And in the language they speak, you will have to go back to your experts, because this activity will span across functions. So you will be faced with talking beyond functional silos in organizations. And then, create value along the entire value chain, which will require to take a position of not being only a sustainability expert, but being a sustainability leader. So Jan talked about enablement. It is important to enable ideas to be brought to life on different business levels. Okay, so I hope you are now curious enough. So let's see how we can bring sustainability into the main playing field. And I will start indeed with an example from the company I work for, Essity. A few words to Essity. Essity is a global leading hygiene and health company, operates in 150 countries around the world, so a lot of consumers and also business partners, B2B. And Essity is committed to sustainability, is also participating in the science-based target initiatives. This means for us we have targets, sustainable targets for 2030 and 2050, and the company reports on a regular basis the achievement of the targets. Okay, so Essity has recently launched an innovation in the kitchen paper towel segment. The innovation is called Seva Vision Vac Smart and is the smartest roll. So what makes this innovation is that it eliminates the core in the middle of the rolls for less waste, and a new technology is allowing to have 2 times more towels on each roll, which makes the product compact. And this automatically means less packaging material, less transport emissions, less space needed at shelf, but also less space needed at home for consumers, while keeping the quality of the product. So by this, the innovation brings CO2 emission reduction of 10% and makes no compromises on quality. So consumers have no drawbacks because of more sustainable solution. So win-win solution for all. And I will start with few messages from the company, from important leaders in the company that fully support the launch. So Essity has launched the innovation, and a statement from the President Global Consumer Tissue is talking about new chapter in the sustainable tissue production, reducing waste and CO2 emissions. The Vice President of the region Central and South Europe is talking about category innovation leader. So consumers will have a sustainable choice without compromises. Now I have a third statement that is from the director of the factory in Mannheim, talking about 20 million investment in the coreless technology, which is the technology that enables this product. So this is setting new standards for the European tissue production, and the step is a very strong step and requires, as you see, quite strong investment from the company. Now, by now, I hope you have a big question mark. How is this possible? Because Essity is operating in the same environment and facing the same monster task to make it happen in a business as usual environment, right? I will go with you through the main step of the approach, sharing the example that we have. So I spoke about stakeholders or decision makers. And indeed, in a project that is driving sustainability agenda, you will need to be prepared to talk to many stakeholders. And now I didn't fill the chart just to make it complicated for you, but to demonstrate the variety of stakeholders you will face. And the example is for a business environment. So if you work in a governmental organization or regulatory organization, your stakeholders will be different. And nevertheless, it's important to consider several perspectives. So if you start with excitement about a sustainability idea, one of the departments you will need to talk is sustainability strategy in a company and reporting to understand how does your ideas fit in the overall picture of a company. You very often need to be confronted with how do we bring return on investment that your idea will need. So be prepared to connect with a finance department, marketing and innovation, research and development, shopper and customer, retailer, legal, unavoidably production when the idea is correlated with new technology, and last but not least, your management team. So identifying the stakeholders is very important because you know which are the areas you need to tackle to bring a sustainability idea to life. And then I talk about the second part, which is what is the language they speak? What are the KPIs that drive behavior in decision making? And here I have examples. Obviously, if the stakeholders are different, the KPIs will be different. But very often when you talk about sustainability ideas with your sustainability strategy and reporting team, people will be very interested to understand how big, how significant is the contribution of your idea. You need to make it measurable. Also align with important global measurement mechanisms like SBTI targets. How does it contribute to achieving the overall targets the company has set? Totally different world and language if you talk to a finance person who would very often ask you just for business case and have a competitive return on investment. And you will need to make sure that your idea competes with everything else that is on the desk of a finance decision maker, because priorities will be done on base of the competitive return on investment you are bringing. Then if you talk to marketing and innovations, questions like, how is your idea building the brand? How is this relevant for consumers? How do we differentiate on the market? Do we bring a competitive advantage with that idea? In the area of R&D and product development, people will start to compare with the research field we have defined. Is the technology scalable? Is it realistic to cascade across categories, across geographies as well? In the world of shopper and retailer, you will face KPIs that are related with on cost for sustainability, which is not what consumers and shoppers are willing. You will need to talk about scope 3 emissions of retailers. And then the journey goes further. So I will stop on two elements, which is production, very important for the innovation that was brought by Essity. So in the production, you will need to think about what is the technology needed, how are the resources, what is the complexity you introduce in a factory, in a production site. And then last but not least, your management team will need to understand how is your idea bringing growth and profit in the bigger picture of the company. And now you can imagine that each of these key stakeholders will have a number of offers and number of projects to choose from. So make yourself competitive and make sure you have allies on your side that can help you translate into the language of each stakeholder. It is quite a stretch for a single sustainability manager to span across such a broad organization. And I don't want to be dramatic, but let's stay realistic. If you fail to answer the questions of key stakeholders and decision makers, they will turn into key showstoppers. It is as hard as this is in a business environment, and I think it's just fair to realize that and work against it. Because the other picture is also true, that if you are able to deliver value in the eyes of stakeholders, you will get a green light. So now I use a euro sign that is with some leaves on it, be careful. Not every stakeholder is talking about monetary value, right? So in the eyes of stakeholders, you need to be very precise. What is the stakeholder KPI and how do you express it? Because in that very moment, you will get a lot of backwind. And what I often say is, this is the moment to anchor sustainability in a business process, or what we call business as usual. And what happens in that moment is, once sustainability is elevated to the business highway, the rules are speed and scale. But the anchoring point is, you need to embed it in a business activity. And this is the way actually how you make sustainability unstoppable. Businesses work on the drivers of speed and scale, and this is the moment where sustainability goes with the speed of the business. And maybe one last chart on the innovation of Essity. So value creation approach ends with value for all. So here you can see the team. You can see also the complexity of the machine that is installed to make all of this, to bring it to life. But once you have a sustainable product out on the market and it's supported by the business, you drive a big impact, a bigger impact. And don't forget, so sometimes stakeholders can be difficult, and they feel like they want to stop sustainability and just place another barrier. But all of us want to protect planetary health, and all of us want to be proud of what we are doing. So this concludes the approach of value creation, making it happen in a business as usual environment. And I will end with some personal note on that. So stay brave and courageous. Spanning across functional silos is very exhausting. Speaking the language of multiple stakeholders can feel challenging. But we have all been educated to act and navigate in a business as usual environment. And some of you have multiple years of experience navigating exactly this environment. So if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? I think you have all that it takes. Just go for it now. So thank you from my side. I hand over to Birgit.
What a wonderful and inspiring presentation, Jan and Vanya. Thank you so much. And I especially like the last sentence. So, who do you want to have become? Wer möchtest du gewesen sein? That's so important because it's your role, it's your sphere of influence you're able to use to transform the world for the better. And I think that's super important. We have two questions coming up here in the chat, and I'd like to hand over again, sincere. It's really a good, wonderful presentation. It was a lot, really very inspiring. So Ruven Schwab has a question to the two of you. And I read it from the chat. How can corporate values be credibly demonstrated and communicated when sustainability measures are driven by legal requirements and entail substantial costs? I don't know, maybe Jan, you start.
Yeah, I can start. So important part, I think we need to differentiate here the requirement of the task. So ESG, of course, have been, and right now even more, is formally driven by regulation and doing compliance. But in Germany, we like to use the metaphor, a good horse is only jumping as high as it needs to be, and that's basically the requirement that you need to do within the compliance. The task of what Vanya is addressing and what I as well was talking about is like how to drive sustainability in the scope of what a company needs, because regulatory requirements are a little bit company agnostic. So they try to have a one-size-fits-all approach, which for sure is not the perfect. But on the other hand, and that is what we want to emphasize here, is you really need to understand how to come on the ground with the peers, and that might be different on the organization, and understand problems right now where sustainability become an operational supporting or enabling part of a project, of a team, or of a product, and that goes to different kind of directions. And maybe I can make an example here on that regard. So basically, we have a lot of regulations touching now the supply chain. But basically, supply chain is now not managed entirely by regulation when we talk about resilience. So resilience is encompassed on a very different kind of understanding of what you maybe need to bring in to support the value. And the value is coming from you being there and supporting to do the right things. And that's maybe something Vanya can further enrich from her point of view.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jan. Indeed, regulations are another obstacle on the way. And even if you have sometimes a great sustainability idea, you will need to do the due diligence to substantiate every statement that we do outside on any of the communication touch points need to be substantiated. And then yeah, very often, as you said, Jan, it's generic regulation. So we need to balance very often between being brave to state sustainability benefits in a bold way and still staying compliant. And this is a fine line, especially in the insecurities that we have today with the regulations. And nevertheless, I would like to encourage everyone to go for the maximum, because we bring great ideas and it's important to talk about it. But it is very clear that we operate in a regulation-driven world, and this needs to be considered. So when I explain about the stakeholders, legal and regulations is one of the areas you will need to deep dive and speak the language to. Thanks a lot for the question. Very important, especially with regulations like empowering consumers to make the green transition. So yeah, a lot of new regulations that we need to balance and consider.
Which fits perfect. Also regulation question from Hello, Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie. It goes into the AMCO, it goes into the PPWR regulation, and she's asking, what do these two regulations play in this context? What role?
Oh, Jan is on hold, so I will start answering the question. Indeed, very important role. So I already spoke about EMCO, and let's take that as an example. So the regulation is going in place this year, which means that in the world of claiming sustainability benefits, this is very important to review all the claims you have, to review all claims that you have in packaging, in communication. And now I come to the major challenge that Essity, but also many companies face, is how do we ensure that in all possible touch points, and now think about a global organization with many products, with many categories operating in all over the world, but also like in many countries in Europe where these regulations are in place. So this complexity of being compliant and not going into the area of greenwashing while still being very clear to consumers, because on the other side, consumers just want to understand what is this product good for. So being clear and direct, but still complying with regulations is the fine balance in between. And I can just speak from Essity point of view. So all the good things we are doing in sustainability, we want to communicate clearly to consumers. And this is probably the most challenging point, that we need to be very precise what we communicate, and with one or two claims, we need to be able to build competitive advantage, to explain to consumers that this is a product that is beneficial for the planet, and still serve the overall ambition, which in base is good, to avoid greenwashing. So we all want to avoid greenwashing, and now it's again this balance in sustainability. The purpose is good, but the regulations very often are generic, and they represent hurdles. At least in the first months of implementing, that feels like a very big hurdle. And Jan, if you want to expand the perspective, so you work with many different industries, but regulations are valid also across industries. So if you want to add on that point, please do so.
I think it's very good covered from your perspective already, and I do think, and that's just what I want to emphasize again, we are regulatory driven. That's a task that you need to do on hand, but you need to understand in the task that you're giving on hand what kind of freedom you're giving yourself to go beyond certain exercises to fulfill the compliance, but as well think operational and bring the clear value to the organization, because in the end, if you don't do that, you're only going to be seen as a compliance department or the extension of a compliance department, and may not have the full chance to show your entire value if you may be not able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to dig in something also what both of you said is the so-called observation of a normality bias in the world at the moment. So the dangerous illusion in thinking that everything will remain as it is at the moment, even though there are a lot of kind of like change going on. It's like an ostrich effect. It's a Vogelstorch effect that you put your head in the sand and you're thinking like it will go over, not you really using your sphere of influence as you think that this kind of like playground is a common playground. And I'd like to dig into this because also Jan and also Vanya, you mentioned the topic of business as usual. And I personally think that business as usual might be the greatest risk of our times at the moment. And how are we able to overcome old patterns? And what is the role of leadership in the transformation to really use the sphere of influence from the teams, from yourself, from the organization? What are your takes on this?
Birgit, I have been, but to all of you, I have been reflecting a lot about the role of a sustainability, let's say it person in a company. And while we often get caught up in regulations and reporting and how do we measure what is the status today, we need to admit to ourselves the status to be clearly represented is necessary. But what we need to do right now also with speed and scale is to act. And there is I observe a bit of a shift between what we will call sustainability expert or sustainability leader. And in the approach of value creation, that is very close to business as usual processes, it is important that you take the role of a sustainability leader. Make yourself prepared to lead, to drive, to overcome obstacles, and go beyond reporting. That is absolute. Go beyond regulatory. These need to be kept in mind as a base, but that's only the beginning. From there onwards, to push a sustainability idea in an organization, leadership that is able to communicate and convince on senior level decision makers across organization is important. So I see the role of a sustainability responsible in a company moving towards leadership that can steer business as usual in a very firm and decisive way. And that will be needed if we want to reach from idea that is maybe compliant and everything, but bringing it to life. Because what our objective at the end of the day is, we want to improve and protect planetary health. So that's the measurement for success. Reporting is one step on the way, but not the end destination. And even if that's very challenging, we cannot stop there.
If you think about what gets measured gets done, I'm a strong believer coming from C-level. In our case, sustainability, it's measure what really matters. So the two of you, what are the one or maybe two most important KPIs you want to encourage to set in every organization?
Maybe before I answer the question, I want to as well extend on something what Vanya was saying and what you mentioned before that. The task of sustainability might put you a little bit into a disbelief how big the task is, and you are challenged so much from your surrounding doing the perfect work. But basically, it's absolutely unrealistic to do everything perfectly. But what is the wrong thing is to overdo the planning. Of course, on compliance regards, you need to be compliant, but I think we need to come into action. We will need to start. Progression is your work to perfection. So go the way. If we talk about KPIs, I do think a KPI cannot be like something so singly industry agnostic being there to give an overview across all industries, but I can make you an example how things are working in a good way. For example, in automotive, a lot of cars are getting built, and it's so much easier to measure your impact to put it down on a relatively approach. So to say, how much water is getting used per car, how much CO2 is getting created per car. So maybe try to understand how to really understand your performance on those items which are relevant. So that's one important part if we speak about a KPI. The general absolute assumption is important, but put it into a relatively note here. And secondly, if we talk about like what KPIs are very important, honestly, it's CO2. So that's the one which are getting right now measured from investor and banking point of view. And secondly is taxonomy aligned metrics, which are as well getting right now viewed from investor perspective and banking point of view. So those components, but put them in the perspective. Yeah.
Vanya, do you want to build on this?
No, I was just reflecting also on what Jan is saying, because from my perspective, so the CO2 measurement builds up as one of the key performance indicators indeed in sustainability. So decarbonization definitely plays a role. And especially in a world of manufacturing, what we do at Essity is to look into the entire value chain creation, to look into resources that are needed, so reducing resources, building on circularity, reusing resources, also another very important point. In the case that I shared from Essity, to measure the impact, we use the life cycle analysis. This is also approach to look into the whole and understand what are the negative elements into the full value chain and where we can have a positive impact. So holistic picture is important. But I will also observe that decarbonization plays more and more important role, considering the planetary challenges. It is a clear guidance.
So a quite complex task coming up with objectives or key performance indicators, or like measuring what really matters. It's compromising from time to time and also very complex. How do you see the role of artificial intelligence in in kind of like getting more transparency. So what's your take on this? I know it's also kind of like polarizing, but to solve like complexity.
I mean, AI is a great facilitator on the one hand to educate yourself and get things moving, but same counts as well for your entire stakeholders who maybe before that would have always asked you, but you have like closing a gap of education is very, very helpful. And besides that, I think especially when it comes to coding, you can now build your own dashboards, your own analysis so much quicker, giving you maybe a chance to close the gap of an analyst role by AI, and that is very, very helpful.
Thank you.
And if I may add, because we spoke about the complex regulations. So they can bring such a level of complexity that AI actually can be very helpful to navigate. I spoke about keeping conform with EMCO and operating in a company that is global and then has a lot of categories and a lot of touch points towards consumers. So this huge amount of information, bringing it into a EMCO conform way of expressing is a monster task indeed. And AI with solutions like AI agents that are specialized, for example, on EMCO, can be a very helpful tool to navigate the complexity of the sustainability environment.
Thank you so much. So I have one last question to the two of you. I would love to get someone is coming in now, and I would love to get like maybe a short answer from the both of you. It's what leadership skills are needed nowadays and value creation, the language of business. Why in a kind of like wrap up of this wonderful Brainfood session?
Jan, I will start and you can add. So you have asked about short
leadership
answer.
skills.
Leadership
and also
skills.
language
Exactly.
of business.
It is important to have a very strong leader that has sustainability background and is anchored in the core business. And that's essential. The caveat is to have a sustainability expertise, but being anchored in core business where you have the power actually to take decisions and drive projects with scale and speed.
Thank you.
Very quick answer, I would say have a very broad understanding of business needs and shareholder interest and being able to formalize it into the needs of sustainability and being able to address things. Simple.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the great presentation and discussion today. Also for everyone joining us today. And I'd like to give an outlook on what's coming up next. Maybe we have a breakfast together with Stephanie, who unfortunately already left. It's going to be on May 20th. On the next slide, we can see that another Brainfood is coming up. It's together with Anastasia and also with, oh my God, it's so small, I can't read it on my screen. And it's about Leonard. Thank you so much. It's about biomaterials. And on the next one, it's on June 11th, by the way. So sign up. And we already heard about the wonderful Footprint Intelligence Summer Conference and our CISL networking coming up on June 25th. Please sign up. The registration link has been communicated in our WhatsApp channels. And then we have, as a next one, we have a CISL Beer Garden, and it's facilitated by Falco. And Falco will send a doodle to find out the right date, which is now scheduled between the 15th, 16th, and 14th of July. So thank you, everyone, on the last slide for your participation. And thank you to all CISL alumni to really making this community that vibrant and great. And it's a super summer. And let's also co-create what's next. What topics or formats would you like to see in September, in autumn? Do you want to contribute? Do you want to make a Brainfood session? We are here. It's from alumni or alumni. And yeah, let's continue and contact me, for example, via LinkedIn. I'm very looking forward to what's coming up next. And thanks again to Sebastian, to Vanya, and Jan for supporting this wonderful session today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Birgit. And thank you also for the passion to lead the community and to bring all these events to life.
An honor. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sebastian, jetzt sind wir live.